we're essentially going to cover this concept of Azure Policy as you see here, right? Let me mess with that a little bit. So we're going to run a quick kubectl get constraints, right? Take a look at how Azure Policy integrates with what we call constraint templates, right? But essentially our reference will be this. What I'm going to do is prevent in real time to show you kind of the capabilities of it. So let's take a look at our cluster first, right? So if we get pods, we'll run kube system, so you can see what's out of the box, right? I chose Calico along with the policy webhook, right? So this is essentially going to be what's going to catch that or intercept the policies that we are pushing to, and that's going to connect with your constraints. So think about this as being from your cluster, right? We'll do a kubectl get constraint template. As you can see, I already have a couple going on here. So we can see we have a couple, right? So today was different. I did this in a previous recording. So we can do kubectl get constraints. And this essentially is going to take some time to load, but let me maximize this view. You can kind of see what the constraints are, what the enforcement action is, right? So some container limits, and then the total violations if those are going, right? So let's clear this out and make it a little nice for you. So we're essentially going to try to push this cat policy.yaml, right? If you can see, this one's privileged being false, right? But now let's change that to true and see if we can run that. So run that. We'll put true, right? Do a quick save, clear. Uh-oh. Cube. Oh. Type a little typo there. Okay. So we can see a couple things, right? So this essentially will show when this was applied, right? So we can see the error from the server, forbidden, we get a message like this, right? You can always have some type of custom messaging as well, depending how it allows you to integrate with that specifically with that policy, but that's just kind of an out of the box, right? Now, you see our context right here. Privileged container is not allowed to run nginx privileged, right? So now let's change that and see what we get. So now we'll go back to this portion. We'll go to privilege, right? And we're going to put that up false now. Do a quick save. So now we can see that this actually allowed us to deploy, right? So now we'll go into our default namespace so we can see we're up and running, right? Let's also get services just to show you what else is running. So think about this Gatekeeper webhook service as well, interacting with that policy webhook service. So Azure Policy essentially extends that access, right? I do have an nginx load balancer as well, as you can see through this out of the box, and I am running Calico, so we're seeing Calico set up in the back end as well, right? So now let's delete that pod, right? See default, okay. Delete nginx privileged. Now, the main purpose of going over this, right, for the CKS purposes is you're likely going to have to touch on what we call Open Policy Agent, right? Now, it's not going to be as fully in the sense of you writing from scratch what Open Policy Agent is. Just be aware of kind of its purposes, how you can restrict operations. Think of from that context, right? There's a lot you can do and extend depending on your provider as well, right? Now this is using the Azure Policy add-on, right? So if you can kind of see my compliance set, I have a couple for this one specifically. So you can kind of see some of the details here, right? So this will tell you Cube East, and then it will tell you some more details, right? If your resources are compliant. Think of this as a check, right? If this is met, anything that does happen in between from there as part of component events or anything that's not compliant, it should pop up here, right? So this is more of the web user interface for you. So in your cluster, right, you'll have this tab policies, and this is essentially that add-on feature. But just to quickly go over that, right, this is one of those kind of stopgaps. You can also have, you can deploy an AKS pod with more secure function, right? But think of this from your own operations, right? Maybe you're running some tests, you want to kind of see the effects of using that policy, so that's more of the extension, right? I'm adding this a part of the previous video that's kind of going over the command line, but this is essentially a depiction from an architectural standpoint, what exactly we're looking for, right? Um, Let me also include, if I can, um, put this in dark mode, it's a little bit easier to see. So if we can see, right, this is a command I used, a part of our demo that we're showing today, and the constraint templates associated with it, right? So this is just a quick showing of using OPA, but from a cloud-hosted provider standpoint, right? So Azure Policy is essentially the backbone of Azure across all your workloads, right? You can kind of customize it as much as needed. There's a lot of out-of-the-box policies, and they work with enablements, right? So typically they work with a few like enable, disable, or essentially an um, audit if not exist, right? Or deny essentially. So when you think about what policies you want in place, right, especially with cluster operations, you definitely don't want privileged pods running. The reason being is typically a pod doesn't need that root access, right? So when we think about our YAML manifest, this might encompass, security contacts, right? And with that, we can do a privileged. And if we do a false, this is typically what you want to have, but you also want to specify if it has to run as a specific user, right? Run as user. I have seen some people put 999. This could be 1000, right? You could also run as a group, but you always want this set because out of the box, if you were just doing from the CKA perspective, right, we'll do a quick, kubectl run, and we'll do like an image and Nginx, right? And then we'll do a dry run equals client. I'll put YAML, right? Sorry about this bleeding over here. But we definitely don't want to do that in day-to-day operations, right? So more in the sense of from declarative, we're going to go to a more restrictive stance. And that's where privilege pod restrictions are definitely going to be your backbone. And it's going to interact with the Open Policy Agent Gatekeeper, and it's going to use the Azure Policy add-on, right? So this is just a quick showing of what that looks like, right? I definitely have my policies onboarded, right? So kubeast 1 is our cluster. We're going to go to our policies. You want to enable this to use this specifically, right? So once that's enabled, then we can go back to our overview. Okay, guys, so just wrapping up, I just wanted to cover essentially in a summary, right? This kind of touched the surface of Open Policy Agent. So I just wanted to show you kind of a plug-in as far as what Open Policy Agent is, right? So this is created by Straya. This essentially works across different applications, different technologies as well, as you can see here, right? So we have Terraform, we have Envoy, but the cool thing is they have this open and playground, right? And they have a couple things to kind of get you up and running, as you can see, right? So if I open in the playground, he'll launch into this specific rego playground. So let's say I wanted to add something as far as I could do not starts with image, and then I could do, okay, maybe I don't want people pulling images from gcr.io, right? Something of that nature. Now you can also see on the right side what that essentially would look like. You can evaluate it. Image SQL, right? Comes from an untrusted registry, and then kind of the output. And then you can also publish it as well, right? And it has some stuff to kind of get you up and running. So just wanted to cover that from a perspective of training, right? But also think about other ways you can leverage this very powerful tool in your Caliber, right? So just wanted to plug that in. And wrapping up today, I hope you learned something new, a part of Kubernetes. I will cover some more, and feel free to drop a comment of any other topic you want me to cover, and we can definitely dive into that as needed.